In this overview, we're going to be talking about the efficiency of price floors. Price floors are also sometimes called a price support. They are essentially a limit on how low a product's price can go. It's a price regulation that sets the lowest price that can be legally paid for a good or service. Price floor is given basically to prop up the price of some producers. This is going to be the basic graph that we're going to use for a price floor. We're going to have a basic supply and demand cross here. So we have supply and demand, and the normal equilibrium price is here at P star. And normally in the market we would see the efficiency of all the entire area ABC to the consumers and D, E, and F to the producers. But here in this situation what we're going to say is, for some reason or another, we need to make sure that this price doesn't go any lower than PF, this price floor level here. And so we're going to limit the legal price that can be paid for this good or service. So what this actually does is this stops the equilibrium from reaching P star and ending up at a higher quantity. And what it does is it stops purchases at PF and this quantity here. So we limit the actual quantity that ends up being bought and sold in the market, because demanders are willing to pay what is represented by their demand curve, and if the price doesn't go any lower than PF, they stop consuming, and so they do not consume between the areas of PF and P star as shown on this section of the demand curve here. So we stop consuming once we reach that price floor PF, and therefore we lose the quantities between the old equilibrium and this new equilibrium quantity as shown. So as we said, there is consumer surplus A, B, and C in a normal market setting without this price floor in place. We go all the way down to that P star and we get all of the consumer surplus A, B, C, the consumer surplus being everything below the demand curve but above the price that consumers have to pay. And then our producer surplus, everything below the price that the consumers receive but above their costs, above their supply curve. So we get all of this area D, E, and F. There is no deadweight loss because all of the transactions that can take place are taking place, the ones that are mutually beneficial, and there's no exchanges being left on the table, and there's no exchanges taking place that cost more than what they are valued at. So there is no deadweight loss in this situation. We are at efficiency. Now, when we think about what's going on with the price floor in place, if we look at the price floor, we can see a different outcome. Here with the price floor, we're going to have a situation where the entire consumer surplus is represented just by triangle A here. This is the area below the demand curve but above the price that the consumers actually have to pay, and that's the only area, so we have that consumer surplus of A. The producers, on the other hand, they receive everything that is above the supply curve but below the price that they have to pay for all of the units that they sell. Now we only sell up to this quantity here. This is the quantity with the price floor. And so for all of these units from 0 up to this quantity, we have to look at the area that's above the supply curve but below the price that they actually receive. Right? So it's what's above their costs, below the price that they actually receive just for these quantities that they receive. So out to this quantity with the equilibrium and the price floor. And we will see that we get areas B, D, and F as our producer surplus. Now we can do a little bit of easy calculation here, and we can see that we used to have a situation where A, B, C, D, E, F were all areas of surplus, and now we only have A, B, D, and F. So let's look at if we tried to cancel these out. If we cancel out A, if we cancel out B here, if we cancel out the D, and if we cancel out F, well, we can see that from the market outcome to the price floor outcome, we have lost the areas of surplus C and E. And lo and behold, these are our areas of deadweight loss. So we end up with C and E as deadweight loss. We see this triangle CE as our deadweight loss. These are transactions that should take place but don't because of the price floor in place. We only actually see the transactions up to the quantity of the price floor here, but we should have all of the transactions up to the normal equilibrium quantity taking place. Why is that? Well, we can see that the demand is our willingness to pay, or the value for each of these items. So past that price F on the demand curve, if we go down a little bit, we can see that the value is higher than what the producer's cost would be for that next unit to be produced. And if the value is higher than the cost, then we should be making that mutually beneficial exchange. But because this price floor prohibits us from moving beyond the price floor quantity, we do not make that exchange. And so therefore that area in between represents the lost value from that trade. And that can take place for the unit after and the unit after, all the way down until we hit that equilibrium price. And the entire region and the entire area of those triangles, C and E, represents that lost value that we could have had from those mutually beneficial exchanges, and thus we call that our area of deadweight loss. And so in this situation with no other market failures, we see from an microeconomic perspective that when we move from a market setting to a price floor, we adjust around some consumer and producer surplus. We shuffle it from the consumers to the producers, and we also take on some deadweight loss, the deadweight loss triangle CE in this case.